Something's different, not like it used to be. The weight of our dreams, love.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of the Beethewellness. The Beethewellness is really challenging to say. Beethewellness podcast. Adam
Hello,
Vanessa
everyone.
Lambert here.
Yes,
Sort
I'm
of
here.
two opposite sides of the state. Coming
Yes,
to you
Adam
via the
and
wonders
I are
of
in
the
the as we talk over each other. Clearly, we're not sitting in the same room. We are in the midst of our first stretch of time apart, Adam and I, as his fire season gets underway. So we're about 3 weeks into a month apart. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. We get really sad this time of year, everyone, because it's lots of time apart. So thanks for giving us this podcast to see each other in Skype.
Yeah. Hang out on Skype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue on with our questions from last week or 2 weeks ago at the end of last session when you guys gave us a bunch of questions to talk about on the podcast. We're going to kind of keep chipping away at those and hopefully give you guys some answers to your questions.
Yeah, a few of them. There's, right, I think, what are we going to get to, like 4 or 5?
Yep,
Something like that
exactly.
today.
Yeah. So we tackled the big subject of hormones last week. And this week we're going to try to get into a couple more subjects. So first one that we wanted to talk about was whether or not cheat days are okay. And the person asked if, just like once a week, a cheat day is okay. So
Yeah.
hit it.
Yeah, cheat days. And so there's all kinds of problems with it, right? Because like even just the word cheat indicates that you're doing something you're not supposed to, and it comes with like this, hedonic reward center kind of firing thing, right? So just the vernacular can be kind of problematic. But to talk specifically about the foods and stuff, I mean, it really comes down to what you mean by cheat, right? So like for instance, when we're talking about autoimmune stuff, like gluten specifically can cause, gut irritation and inflammation for 10 to 12 days, from just a single dose. So if your deal is that you're just going to cheat once a week, and that once a week you have, glutinous bread or a pizza or something like that, then
Glutinous extravaganza.
yeah, some sort of
Chips Ahoy.
Yeah.
And a side of sourdough bread.
Yeah. Or yeah, exactly. Then odds are your gut's actually not going to see any benefit, and you're just sort of depriving yourself of gluten for 6 days.
Other 6 days a week.
Yeah. I mean, not that it's probably not beneficial from some other perspective, as far as like insulin resistance and stuff like that. But the main thrust of what we're trying to do with a lot of this stuff is to reduce inflammation and reduce autoimmune potential and that kind of stuff. So, from the gluten perspective, once a week cheat days, not legit at all.
No bueno. There is some benefit to giving yourself a gluten dose once in a while so that you don't become so intolerant to it that it creates an issue, that if it, ends up in a food or a plate at dinner or something, that you end up having, this terrible reaction to it. Yeah. There's something, disaster pants, as Kelly Starrett would put it. Yeah. But, that's sort of more just what is the word? No, what? Yeah, it's like
an inoculation. Yeah, it's like a hormetic stressor. Yeah, and exactly. I mean, this is to be clear. This is for people who would be like potentially gluten intolerant or on the kind of the lower spectrum of gluten intolerance. I mean, not certainly if you're celiac or have Crohn's disease, or one of these more advanced autoimmune situations. Then a little gluten inoculation is probably not a great idea. But
and by all means, don't let this podcast change what you already know.
But wait.
Wait, I can have gluten now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. We were just talking about this with Katie Cordoza, who you may remember that we interviewed several weeks ago at paleobug.com. And we were talking about how we used to really struggle with this wanting to binge. And our binges were a little bit dirtier. We'd like want ice cream that was, crappy ice cream, dryers or something that we just were like, screw it, we're going to cheat.
Milkshakes.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
I actually, Katie Bug and I have this funny story. We went to In-N-Out Burger at one point I think this was during like the height of our CrossFit careers.
Yeah, it was.
If you could call them careers. And I don't know what the case was, but for some reason we decided to have In-N-Out burgers twice in one day. And the first time we went through, they forgot to give us our French fries. So the second time we went through, we told the guy, hey, we were here earlier today and you forgot to give us our French fries. And it was at that point we realized we'd hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
If you're going back to In-N-Out the second time and saying they forgot your French fries earlier, just give it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyhow, the point is, as time has gone by and as we've progressed into this whole wellness practice, we've just realized that the cost of those binge days or those cheat days for foods that are just really not healthy, it just takes more than it gives. And so ultimately, you're not looking to keep these things in your life. You're looking to change your practice to the point where you no longer want to eat In-N-Out burger twice in one day. And you're looking to change the vibration of how you exist. So, we're not here to tell you whether or not a cheat day once a week is good or bad, but it's about changing your outlook to your health. And if you do want to have a cheat day, don't think of it as a cheat day. First of all, just decide, hey, I want to make something that I don't normally make as an everyday staple of my meals, but I'm going to make it with really quality ingredients. I'm going to try to, if I want paleo strawberry shortcake, I'm going to go to the farmer's market and get strawberries, and I'm going to make my own cream, and I'm going to make this the best possible version that it could possibly be so that my body can buffer it and process it more quickly, and the downside of it becomes much less.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, because just sort of letting go of the concept of the cheat day and just saying, I take really good care of myself. I do all of these things for myself. I know I can buffer a In-N-Out burger if that's what it comes down to. But is that really what I want to put in my body? Yes or no? And I really want something that's salty and crispy and chewy just because that's what I want. Well, maybe you go and you get some corn chips and you put Kerrygold cheese on it and you make nachos. Right. I mean, there's that kind of a thing, right? So it's like crunchy, salty, cheesy, but one of the least innocuous of the grains. A little bit of salt, some cheese. You're probably just going to feel puffy the next day, and it'll all be fine.
Yeah, and this especially for women, because we do have hormonal fluctuations. So there are certain times a month where I literally crave something salty or something sweet, and it's a real thing. Yeah. This is not just in my head. And there's been lots of articles written about it, and a lot of people talk about it, that there are certain times of the month where you will really have these cravings. And it's probably not the worst thing that can happen. A lot of times it shows that your body otherwise is quite stable and in a quite, nice balance in terms of your bloodstream and your blood sugar. So ultimately, I just think it's about coming into harmony with what you're trying to accomplish here. And the other thing about it is, you can have treats, you can have things that aren't, your normal staple meals. And what you have to reconcile is whether or not those things are taking away from the results you're looking for. So if you want to have those kind of things 3 to 5 days a week and you're trying to lean out, those two concepts are not going to work together. You have to decide what's more important. And you can do whatever you want as long as you're seeing the results and as long as you like the body that you're in and you like the way that it's trending. And that may mean that you hit your ideal weight range and you decide, you know what, every night after dinner, I'm going to have some kind of treat. And my weight is stable and I feel good and it's not a problem and it doesn't spiral me into some kind of sugar craving cascade of events, then that's cool. That's your own personal decision. But don't put yourself in a position where you're having a treat every single night and then you're so sad because your body's not changing and you've been paleo, quote unquote paleo, for 4 months. Right. Like, totally. Those two things, they're not congruous. You can't work together like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It either works for you or it doesn't. You know, I mean, that's just like any of this stuff, you know, it's like, oh, I've been super low carb and I'm not losing weight. Like, well, maybe super low carb doesn't work for you to lose weight, you know?
Right.
And
maybe some carb cycling is what's
maybe
up.
That's what you need to do. But it becomes a pretty individual thing. And I think that's kind of the point here is that, you know, feel free to indulge as long as it meets the, you know, the requirements of what it is that you're trying to do and doesn't, like Vanessa said, spiral you into some slippery slope cascade of events where you're, you know, off the wagon, so to speak.
Absolutely. And this goes back to the guides when we talk about deciding who you are. You know, it's like, are you the kind of person that has dessert every night and then gets depressed that they're not seeing the body composition changes that they want, but everything they're making is paleo and I'm using honey and only a quarter ton of almond flour every night? It's like, well, okay, well, that's not working for you. Yeah. And everyone actually does process a little bit differently. So some people can do a little bit more nut flours or a little more coconut flours or a little bit more of that sort of treat paleo world stuff. But if it doesn't work for you, then you just have to reconcile that and know, okay, I'm the kind of person this does create a slippery slope, or I am the kind of person that I don't see body composition changes and I get depressed. So there's no such thing in our book as cheating. It's just about choices.
Bam.
The end.
Profound. Yes. Yeah. No, I think you nailed it. That really is what it comes down to. Unfortunately, it's not just some cut and dry answer, you know?
No, it's really not. And it, you know, once again, it's really about health for us. It's about your overall wellness picture. So if a treat works in the grand scheme of things for you, then that's great. But I'm just going to guess that if you're asking if it's okay, it may not be working for you. You just want someone to tell you that it is.
I suspect that these, you know, gluten-free waffles are, you know, maybe causing problems. However,
or your figgy jammies are
oh man, see that's
jamming you up.
Those things. That's the slippery slope for me. The figgy jammies.
I can't do the figgy jammies.
I will smoke a box of those things, like chain smoke. What I found though, I did the math on it, and it's actually. It would be interesting to know what like the actual. Yeah, it turns out. No, but I would be interested to know what like the glycemic response is, but I bet it's pretty high. You know, because there is some fiber in there, so it may actually slow it down a little bit. But that is like the exact backloading meal for me. Like I could eat a chicken breast and an entire thing of figgy jammies, and I'd be set on my training days, which is funny. But. I,
however, don't mess with the figgy jammies because it makes me just basically want to bury myself in a tub of ice cream afterwards. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. If you don't know what figgy jammies are, they're Fig Newtons.
Gluten-free
they're gluten-free Fig Newtons. You can get them, I don't know, you can get them at Whole Foods and places. They're dangerous. Yeah. Are they Pamela's? Maybe?
They might be Pamela's, actually. Yeah. I think they might be, yeah.
But be warned. If you just buy one container, like don't fool yourself into buying, you know, multiple and think that you'll spread them out over a month. Like that's not going to happen.
No,
and don't open
you
them
will
in the car.
Eat all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. So I guess kind of continuing on. Yeah. we'll rant a little bit more about overeating and those types of things. So someone else asked about overeating, that they just had an issue with overeating, like straight up just consuming too much food. And, you know, one of the reasons, and just kind of asking what's up with that? Why do I feel the need to eat more than I know I actually need to eat? And what's the deal? How can I get into a better balance with that? And, you know, one of the reasons we love the paleo diet, because it is high in fat and it does seem to be more satisfying than other ways of eating. But there's a lot of other factors. You know, there's such a spectrum of things that are going on when we nourish ourselves. Yes, we are giving ourselves straight up calories and nourishment from that perspective. But we're also tapping into the emotional part of our life. A lot of times we eat socially. We have family issues, and I don't even mean family issues in a negative way, but we have family issues that affect the way we look at food. I come from an Italian family, and you're pretty much, your value is based in how much you can eat. Yeah. So my family loves Adam. Yeah. So, there's just a lot of things. And I think the first thing is to decide, really try to understand, are you eating from an emotional standpoint, or is there something metabolically happening where you're still not getting signaled that you're full?
Yeah.
And that's the first thing to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Is it some sort of an emotional thing, or are you missing some physiological triggers? And that could be, like the physiological trigger component. I mean, that could be from just, this idea, the hyper palatability of food concept, right? So things that hit our reward centers, like sweet things and salty things and crunchy things. I mean, everything that is processed foods are designed to hit those reward centers and just make you eat more. I mean, it's Ruffles potato chips, right? I mean, I bet you can't just eat one. You're like, yeah, it's like Vegas saying, I bet you we take your money at some point, I mean, yep. It's a calculated thing. So there's definitely there's a physiological response to that kind of stuff, which is a large part of why I think that the paleo and primal diet works really well for people who have had, like food craving issues, is because you get away from a lot of that processed stuff and you just start eating real food, and you start to be more attracted to the tastes of wholesome food, right?
Right.
As opposed
and
to those other things.
And that's the first thing that you need to also look at is, have you actually been paleo or primal long enough for some of that stuff to sort of shake itself out, and for you to actually be fat adapted, and for your body to start, being in a more stable place in terms of your blood sugar. And so if you haven't actually done a really concerted effort to get yourself fat adapted and to lower your carbohydrate intake and really minimize sugar and all that stuff, you just may not actually be in the place where you think you should be, because you've been doing it for a certain amount of time. And right. There was someone in the feed a few weeks ago, and I was really glad, because they said, some of the things weren't working for them, or they weren't seeing results. And one of our members responded back, yeah, my wife and my sister had the same issue, but when I really looked at what they were doing, they had never actually gone paleo. They hadn't actually cut out all the things that stopped them from having those triggers.
Yeah.
So, that's another thing.
They were 50-50 paleo.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, okay, I mean, a turkey sandwich is 50-50 paleo.
Yeah, and it's easier to do than you think, because especially when you're undoing all that patterning, you almost have to be hyper vigilant at first to get your body changing directions and to start signaling a different way. So, the first question is, have you actually given yourself the platform for your body to change directions and to signal differently? And then if you feel like the answer to that is truthfully yes, then it's time to look at some of the emotional factors. And that's when educating yourself really comes into play. It's time to start reading books about, what the kinds of therapy that you can do, the mindfulness techniques that you can do. You may even want to speak with someone who's a food therapist, because these are real issues, and a lot of times, and people in general, but especially for women, we have a lot of food neuroses by default, sadly, because I think it's just, there's so much tied in for us about food, and we shouldn't eat, we should eat, what should we do? We need to look a certain way. We need to, there's all the crazy things that go on. So, I guess bottom line is, you got to figure out exactly what the true root of the issue is, and then go from there.
What we should do is, what's the evolutionary psychologist lady? Amy?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Something we should link. That's horrible that I can't remember her name, but we should link that in the podcast, because she's got a ton of articles. You go to her website and you can look up a ton of different articles, and just give this stuff a read, because she'll give you a really clear picture of like what's going on with some of these things, and you may find something that's like
Emily Deans.
Emily Deans, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, evolutionarysci.com, I think is what it is. But
yeah, evolutionarypsychiatry.blogspot.com. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes, and then we'll probably just make an announcement or something in the feed so that it pops up. But yeah, she just has article after article after article that you can read through and, find yourself. And they're like, oh, all right, well, this is probably what's up with this, and here's some some potential fixes, which is cool. So.
Yep, she's a great resource, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of a lot of great resources out there actually that don't have anything to do with the paleo aspect of it. There's a lot of great people out there that are just there to work on the emotional side of it. So it's all about identifying which thing is applicable for you and kind of following that down the rabbit hole and figuring out, how to really get down to solving those issues.
Yeah. And then, so there's something too that people, and certainly in the paleo sphere, if you're in the podcast circuit, or you watch any of the Paleo FX talks and stuff like that, you've probably heard of leptin and ghrelin, and how leptin signaling specifically may be, more instrumental than anybody thinks. And it's actually leptin. It's not insulin. It's, there's a lot of talk about this, and it's completely relevant. Like, don't get me wrong, it's 100% relevant, but it's a little bit in the weeds as far as, like this program's concerned, because ultimately we sort of just treat it the same way.
Right.
So we look at it, you're like, oh man, looks like you've got systemic inflammation, and that inflammation is causing leptin resistance. And so your leptin, now your fat mass is not signaling your body appropriately to tell it to, burn fat and stop storing fat. You're like, oh, well, what do we do about this leptin resistance? Well, we need to reduce inflammation. You're like, oh, okay, well, how do we reduce inflammation? Well, that's what we're doing. We're doing everything that we can to do that, So at least.
Right. And then the strength training is the other thing to really increase your insulin sensitivity and all that good stuff. So it's like we're really already attacking this from both sides.
Yeah, totally. They're just, this is a 30,000 foot view of leptin, but like ultimately, from a practical application perspective, this is just kind of where we're at. You're looking at reducing inflammation, reducing insulin resistance, monitoring or managing blood sugar. We're kind of hitting all those things, So if you like it, go dig around. Stefan Guyenet is a great resource. You can get super deep into that stuff and learn about knockout mice studies and all this. But at the end of the day, eat clean, less palatable foods, get a lot of sleep, and train hard and or train responsibly. Yeah, and
it'll get easier. It really will.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think people are starting to see it. Like I'm starting to see people in the feed that are saying like, "Oh my gosh, like this is happening and this is happening," and all of a sudden I feel more stable doing this. And you're like, which is about right. That we're 4 months. We're starting our 4th month.
We are, yeah.
Or starting our 5th month.
Well, this will be month 5 from the first. If you count the first 21 days.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's people should be starting to see some significant benefit, which is cool.
Absolutely.
So it's super cool for us.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so cool because we've been through it. We're still going through it. Don't get me wrong. We're still in our process as well, every day doing something to change our own story. But I think that was the point I was trying to make before with the clean eating or the binging dirty or whatever, is that at some point, I swear, those things just don't appeal to you anymore. And this all becomes so much easier and so much more natural. And just, my mom actually said to me the other day, sometimes I really just wish, that I could eat bread because sandwiches are so easy. And, it's nice to just be able to stop by a deli and get a sandwich. And I was like, I heard her and it made total sense, but I just couldn't relate to it. I was like, It's just not, I don't know. It's just not that big of a deal. And it's just that difference of like, okay, at some point, it's just not even relevant to you anymore. It's not even part of the decision-making process.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, let's talk about how much to eat to gain muscle or how to gain muscle.
Yeah. So that's again, this is going to be sort of broad strokes because it really is fairly dependent on the individual. However, Well, I guess part of the reason why it's so individual is that there's so many variables besides calorie intake, right? So you could be, so your insulin levels and your protein intake and your sleep and your age and, all of those things really play a pretty big part in sort of your genetic predisposition, right?
Right.
Right. Play a pretty big part in this whole thing. But so for instance, for me, I could eat, 5,000 calories a day of super low carb paleo foods and train, to the best sort of hypertrophy protocol that I could think of. And I'm not going to put on any mass. I just don't put on mass unless I have a significant amount of insulin circulating around. So I could literally eat half the calories, like 2,500 calories a day in a carb cycling protocol and put on weight. Right. And so that's me. And then it's going to be completely different for somebody else. Right.
Right.
So that's,
it's tricky. This is one of the reasons that, we say, like, if you really, really want to get into this stuff, you almost have to do a one-on-one consult with us because we don't know all of these variables about you, but these are general undertones of how to do it. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So without knowing training history and without knowing any of that kind of stuff, it can be pretty challenging. That being said, there are, just like we kind of throw out some general guidelines for macronutrients and calories and all that kind of stuff, there's some similar stuff for gaining weight. And it's super complicated. Basically, eat 500 to 1,000 extra calories a day. And that's 500 to 1,000 extra above your basal metabolic rate that's like adjusted for exercise. So you do your, basal metabolic rate and then say you're training 2 hours a day because you're trying to put on mass. So add another, 800 calories for that. And then on top of that, throw on another 500 to 1,000.
Yep. And remember, your protein needs to be at least 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. So, it's hard. It's actually, if you're a big person, it's tough, like a tall person. And usually it's like males who want to put on weight. I mean, for me, it's 200 to 250 grams of protein a day. And and it's a lot.
That's a pound and a half of hamburger, 4 chicken breasts, 2 protein shakes, 6 eggs, and that's just the protein.
And you're not even, I wouldn't even call you a hard gainer. If you're traditionally or really, really at your core a hard gainer, it may even take a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so eat more.
Eat more. Well, and so this is another thing that's actually, you see it a lot kind of in the paleo world is people, especially with guys who are like, man, I've been super low carb paleo and I'm trying to put on muscle, and before I went paleo, I was a little bit fat, but I had a lot more muscle mass. And now I'm having a hard time maintaining it. And I just have a really hard time eating enough. And you're like, well, when you're super low carb, you're eating one of the most satiating diets known to man. It's predominantly fat and protein, neither of which really do anything for your, to increase your hunger. If anything, they're sort of stymieing that hunger, right? So putting away 1,800 calories a day of fat and protein, you feel just super stuffed. Mm-hmm. And it can be really challenging to throw down that extra, 1,000 to get back up to where you need to be to actually put on any muscle if you're not eating some carbohydrate to get some hunger cravings. That's, so, yeah. And this is where that sort of health versus performance, path divergence thing can happen. Where maybe the healthiest thing for you is to keep eating this minimal calorie diet because you feel perfectly happy and you're lean and, all's well, you're mentally clear and all the things we know that happen with that kind of a diet. But then you have this performance goal of putting on, a significant amount of muscle mass and they don't necessarily jive. So, that's just kind of the deal.
Yeah. It all comes back to personal choices and just deciding what's most important to you. But if you want to gain weight, it's like it becomes almost a full-time job. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're the kind of person that's asking the question, right? There's also people like Vanessa. If she wants to put on muscle mass, she just looks at the bar, just looks at the weight. And she's like, oh man, I can feel my traps getting bigger. And so it's like for her,
like
it's not
today, I went kayaking for a couple hours and I was just like, geez, I think I'm swole.
What's going on with my back?
Kayaking. Like, what is that?
Why do I have such a big back? Yeah, so so that happens too. But those aren't the people that ask these questions, right? Because they're like, what do you mean? How do you put on muscle? I just put on muscle.
Right.
But for those that it's
No,
more
but it's-
challenging for, it's challenging, and and this is why you see these things like carb backloading and these cycling programs where that's what's going on. They're trying to maintain a little bit of lean mass, trying to maintain some hunger, trying to maintain some insulin, in the system, so to speak, to keep everything cruising and keep gaining mass. So it's I don't know. I feel like we talked that one in circles, but.
Well, it's tough because we're talking to a broad audience, not knowing the specifics. And that's kind of what you do is you just talk about the theory of putting on weight if it's hard.
Yeah, totally.
So that's the theory.
Yeah, so that from a food perspective, right? So that's kind of the food idea. And then the other part of it is how you train. What's really going on, like to when you're talking about putting on muscle mass, you're talking about hypertrophy, which is literally increasing the cross-sectional diameter of individual muscle fibers. So you've got a certain amount of muscle fibers in your bicep, and if you want bigger biceps, you need to make those muscle fibers bigger in diameter. That's what's going on. And to do that, bodybuilding has kind of bodybuilding as a sport or phenomenon or plague or whatever you want to call it has sort of sussed all this stuff out for us, right? And really what it comes down to is that you need to be seeing a high volume, moderate weight workout that hits, oftentimes hits individual muscle groups from multiple different angles, right? So think like it's chest day, right? So you're going to go and you're going to do bench press, and then you're going to do incline press, and then you're going to do chest flies, and then you're going to do dips. And, and so all of those things are hitting some different angle and trying to isolate some different portion of the musculature of your chest, and you're just blasting that stuff, right? And so think like 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 15 reps for each of those exercises, and that just gets your chest, right? And then that is trained once a week. But for the most part, you'll train one significant body part per week, train that particular body part once per week. But then a lot of people, especially the guys, are going to hit their chest twice because, everybody needs more chest. And frankly, it's tough. It's like building the pectoralis muscles is tough. They're not, it's not like your legs, where it's a big mover. There's a lot going on. It's actually somewhat challenging to develop chesticles. So, so in your case, high volume and pretty heavy weight. That's just sort of the deal. So if you're eating a whole bunch and you're training this sort of high volume, moderate weight kind of a thing, you should put on muscle mass. But then the other part of it is you have to recover and you have to sleep. Those things have to be happening in there too.
So maybe you can just quickly explain how our program relates to this, because there's probably guys out there that are asking this, saying,
right,
well,
going, I'm not getting bigger on this program.
Am
So
I
what's the deal? Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe they are, and it's just an eating thing, but maybe you can just give them how it relates, how our program relates to that.
The way that we've put the program together is that because it is seasonally periodized, right? We say that all the time, but what does that really mean? And what it means for us is that it's challenging to kind of achieve more than one thing at once when you're talking about strength training specifically. So it's somewhat challenging to put on a significant amount of muscle mass and get really strong at the same time, because the kind of training that you're going to do is different, and sometimes you'll get what would be called training interference, right? So one protocol is interfering with the progress of the other. So the way that we approach this, there's a million ways to do this, and if you had your own trainer that was developing a program specifically for you, it would probably be more of a microcycle than what we're talking about here. But the way that we're approaching it essentially is that we work on hypertrophy in the fall. So in the fall, we're going to be putting on muscle mass, putting on as much, increasing the diameter of those muscle fibers as much as possible during the fall. And then we'll transition in the winter to strength. So now that we have the muscle, we're going to take that muscle and we're going to make it really strong. And then we're going to transition moving into spring. We'll take that really strong muscle mass and we'll give it some endurance and some power ability, right? So we'll make it more functional and usable. And then throughout the summer, we'll just maintain what we've built. You're going to lose some of it, right? Because you're out, we're doing more things and we're more active and we're less focused on this stuff throughout the summer. And then we're just trying to, maintain what we built all winter. And then we start over in the fall, build the muscle back up, make it strong,
and then
make it fast.
The one thing that we add on to that, and that's why we started talking a little bit about carb cycling last month, is that once you've got, a little bit more muscle mass, you've made your muscle mass stronger. Now, if you want to lean out on top of that muscle mass, you have to start looking at the macronutrients and really at the carb cycling and how you can start to do that. So that's why last month we introduced some of those concepts so that those of you who wanted to take that new strong muscle mass and use it to create a leaner physique for the spring and summer, because we all want to look good, aesthetically pleasing for the season. That's why we introduced that at that period as well.
Yeah, totally. And exactly. And it fits perfectly with the sort of the structure of the strength and conditioning program for this time of year. And it's also why, if those of you that have been with us, you're starting to notice that the strength training programs on Monday, Wednesday, Friday are starting to look, very NorCal-ish, if anybody was there at any point, right? So you're seeing this strength session, and then you're seeing a short Metcon at the end that's kind of a gasser. And it works really, really well at leaning people out. So that's what's going on with that.
Cool. So, okay, one last topic that we're going to talk about is the DROM series. So our dynamic range of motion series and why we do it. And we got some comments that people are getting really bored of doing it. And we totally understand. We're really bored of doing it after
for so long. Yeah.
Like, 8 years or something? We feel you.
Yeah. But why we do it. Yeah, it just works. It just works so good. And the thing is, there's a million different kinds of DROMs, and what we should probably do is put together a couple more. But this one's just so good and easy. I mean, it's like you don't. It's not complicated. You can just go through it. But in any case, the general point behind any sort of dynamic range of motion or movement warm up is to incrementally increase your range of motion and intensity as you warm up. So that's why we start small with small movements and small joint structures, and then we go bigger and we go bigger and we go bigger and faster and faster and faster. And it literally gives everything time to go without sort of catching and then biting, and now all of a sudden we've got a knot in a muscle or something that we're trying to get loosened up before we even work out, right?
Right.
So it's a very nice way to just ramp up into this movement from the muscle perspective. The other part of it is that it starts to signal and fire up all the neural pathways and start to recruit more muscle, so that when you actually start to hit your working sets of whatever it is that you're doing, your the neural pathways are lit up and you're able to recruit the muscle that you need to, and it helps with timing and stuff like that, right? So like timing issues, I mean, that's how most people injure their backs, right? I mean, I think I've talked about this before. It's like nobody hurts their back from the piece of paper that they picked up. Like you bend down to pick up that piece of paper and you blow your back out. It's not because the paper was too heavy. Something went wrong. And usually what it is a timing thing as muscles fire. The right things didn't fire in the right order because you've been sitting all day and you just stood up and moved, and your body's like, whoa, I'm not prepared to deal with this. I wasn't ready for that. Yeah. So this is one of the things that the DROM does, is it starts to light all that stuff back up.
And then the other thing is it gets the joints lubricated with the synovial fluid, and it allows little oxygen and hydration of the connective tissues. So if you think about, literally, you're lubricating the joints and getting prepared for those movements and making it more easy for your body to move fluidly, literally, in and out of the range of motion that you're going to be progressing into with your workouts.
Yeah, and it's tough because a lot of the connective tissue, right, it's not very vascular, right? I mean, some of it's not vascular at all. But as you get down into the fine, tight-knit parts of these things, there's not a tremendous amount of blood flow. So you need to get them moving, and you have to get into these end-range sort of dynamic movements sometimes to get that going, and then you get the blood flow in, and then the oxygen comes with the blood and all that, right? And everything just becomes a little bit happier. So
Right.
That's
So
the point.
Yeah, so we know it's a little bit boring, but hopefully you can look at it as okay, this is something I can knock pretty easily. I'm really comfortable with it. I can move through it. And that's kind of what I had to do. At some point, I had to just accept that this worked really well. And I just needed to kind of cruise through it and be thankful I wasn't having to learn a new movement every day to get warmed up, and just sort of change my perspective on it and look on the bright side.
Yeah, look on the bright side. Yeah, the other thing to pay attention to is just to see how your balance is improving. So just next time you do it, take a look at how the leg kicks are, especially the lateral leg swings. And maybe notice that when you first were doing it, it was almost impossible to do without a support, and maybe if you are doing it with a support now and it's incredibly boring, ditch the support. The whole new level, new level of interesting,
And if you really want to step it up, you can put on some cool music and turn it into an interpretive dance.
It's true.
Invite all your friends and family and show them this new dance you came up with.
It's like stationary prancer size.
Exactly. Yeah. If you guys haven't heard of prancer-cise, please Google that immediately and know that will be in one of your workouts someday.
It's going to happen. This is going to be, any more complaining about the dynamic warm-ups and we'll have you prancer-sizing.
I actually had a client that I became really, really close with. We coached for 6 months to a year or something, long enough that as a joke, prancer-sizing into her workouts and sent it to her and said, make sure you look over everything. And if you have any questions, let me know. And I told her I coached her and her husband at least 30 minutes a week. So anyway, I think I'm funny, I guess. Okay. So that's it. That's all we have for this week.
Yeah. I think that's all we're
getting ready to start our new month, and looking forward to getting to know some newcomers in the group. And we had quite a few people come on that heard us on Rob Wolf's podcast. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Guys, we're excited to have you. Hopefully you feel welcome here. It's an amazing group of people, and we say the word tribe a lot because it really feels like that. And we're glad you're part of it. Please tag Adam or I in any questions that you have. And, remember that you can do that by using the @ sign and our names, and keep us posted on your progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And check out, I know Marco, I think, sent out, or did you send out the thing about the wearables, the Fitbit integration and all that?
I did. Yeah.
You did. Right. But just make sure if you guys are using the Fitbit, or there's a couple other ones that are on there, that are available, but just go in and check that stuff out, because we have integration for that. Right now it's integrating with the sleep tracking, but we're just going to keep working on that stuff and trying to make it cooler.
As all encompassing as this program is, we are always trying to improve it and make it more specific, and for you to be able to really dig in deeper to your own specifics and start tracking your own whatever you want to track. If you don't want to do that, that's cool too. But for those of you who are really into data, we're trying to make that more and more available to you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To make a more complex system easier to use.
Yes.
And
the idea is hopefully you can just kind of swipe your thumb over your iPhone one day and it'll tell you what your workout should be and how much water you need that day, and takes all the guesswork out of what you need to do for yourself to be healthy. So,
you know what? Actually, I'm glad you brought up water, because we didn't really have any questions about this, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the hydration thing, because there's so many different ideas about hydration, and so much of the, I don't want to say rhetoric, but so much of the sort of conventional wisdom out there comes from studies that were done with regard to athletic performance and sweating and all of this kind of stuff. So it's not as cut and dry as people like to make it out to be. And that goes both ways. One, from both sides of the spectrum of, hey, you need to drink exactly this amount of water every day. I don't care who you are or what your circumstance is, all the way over to just drink when you're thirsty. Because, both of those spectrums, both ends of that spectrum, I think, don't really tell the whole picture, or the whole story. So I definitely think that intuitive water drinking is important, but you also have to understand the things that can sort of influence that or change I don't know, change, influence, throw off the rails, whatever, that intuition, right? So if you are, you could be super thirsty and it comes across as hungry, so you eat. And the only thing you really wanted to eat was something crunchy, so you have some salty snack, and now your body's like, oh my God, now I'm really thirsty. And you're like, man, I'm still hungry, right?
Yep.
So that's where the intuitive drinking thing starts to kind of break down, is when you don't necessarily have a really clear, picture of what it is that your body's telling you, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's where the recommendations and stuff like what we have in our hydration task in there, those recommendations are for people who maybe don't have the best signaling and are like, okay, I just want somebody to tell me what it is that's right. So if you're an intuitive water drinker and you're nailing it from the, from every other perspective, your tissues feel supple and you're not having, cramps and all of the things that come along with some kind of dehydration, then feel free to swipe, I drank the appropriate amount of water for my body weight and call it a day. Because you did. But if you're not one of those people, then do some of the math, follow all of those recommendations, and you should be good to go.
And maybe just see how you feel if you do one or the other. Because personally, for me, I know that don't think to drink water as much as when I do remind myself when I drink it, I know that I feel way better. So if I just wait for my signaling to kick in, I won't drink as much. And when I just remind myself, I actually drink more and feel way better. So, it's not like like Adam said, it's not cut and dry, but figure out who you are and then just kind of honor that that's your path. And I personally have to remind myself to drink water because I just get busy. And I think a lot of us do. We tune out the rest of our bodily needs.
Right.
Why wouldn't we tune out the fact that we're thirsty for an extra hour, 2 hours? All of a sudden we didn't end up drinking, four extra glasses that we would have if we were actually tuned into our thirst signaling. So I don't know. It's just more food for thought for you guys.
Yeah. Just a matter of sorting it out. I do think though, like that recommendation of having, a pinch or two of Himalayan salt or sea salt in a glass of water in the morning, first thing in the morning, like even if you're an intuitive drinker, try that out. Give that a shot. So put down like 16 ounces or whatever, 12, 16 ounces of water with, a pinch or two of salt in it in the morning, and just see how that treats things for the rest of the day. Like that's kind of a cool way to do it. And then for the athletes, or the people who are outdoor laborers, or wildland firefighters, and I mean any kind of firefighter for that perspective, but people who are going to be overheated and overworked and, definitely going to challenge their body's system from a hydration perspective, know that once you're thirsty, it's too late. Like for those people, intuitive drinking does not work. You need to be hydrated and well hydrated before you are put into this heat stress situation. So anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that concludes episode 12.
That is officially the end of episode 12.
Yes. Go drink some water, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks again for being here, for being part of this journey with us. We love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Peace.
Peace.
Something's different, not like it used to be. The weight of our dreams, love has to take a back seat. We can't take chances. with a dance.